Hi, my name is Julia Frank, and I am the Digital Editorial Director of Vogue Australia. Welcome to the third event in our Vogue Codes virtual series of free webinars. This is the fifth year we've run Vogue Codes, our crusade to see women empowered by technology. But the first year we've gone digital, and we're so happy to be reaching an even bigger audience with our inspiring speakers. I would like to acknowledge our partners, as Vogue Codes wouldn't be possible without their support. Thank you to our presenting partner Westpac and supporting partners Audi, Barbie, Estee Lauder, and Optus. We're really proud to partner with companies not only driving innovation and positive change, but empowering women in technology and science. Before we begin, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting. We especially acknowledge the continued strength and resilience of traditional owners during this time of crisis. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of other communities who may be on this platform today. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest, Maggie Palmer, joining us from New York. Maggie started her career as a journalist, spending 15 years working in Australia and as a foreign correspondent, including traveling to Syria and Italy. In 2016, she founded Pep Talk Her with the mission of closing the gender pay gap. Pep Talk Her is an app that helps you track your career successes. It uses AI to coach confidence and negotiation and to give you a pep talk when you need it most. Her business also runs corporate programs to retain high potential staff. You may have heard her on our Vogue Codes podcast last year, and we are thrilled to have her back for an update. Just before we start, if you have any questions for Maggie, please do ask them in the Q&A chat box below, and I will ask as many as I can. Please also share your thoughts on social media. We would love to hear what you think, and use the hashtag Vogue Codes so we can see and share your comments. Okay, let's get started. Hi Maggie, how are you?
I'm great, Julia. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with everyone.
It's great to have you. How have you found these last few months of lockdown?
Well, listen, I think here in New York, I don't think we're faring as badly right now as everyone in Melbourne. So a big virtual hug to everyone in Melbourne who hasn't been able to leave the house. We're thinking of you all. And also, I guess I just feel really fortunate that despite the pandemic, I'm still able to run my business. We've been growing, and I know that this has been such a tough time for so many businesses. I know a lot of the viewers today may have been laid off, may have had to take pay cuts. So it's a really tough time. And so, I feel really fortunate by comparison, and like a lot of compassion and empathy for everyone who's joining us today who might be going through a tough time.
What have you found has been working for you in your home office, and how do you delineate your work hours?
I wish I had a really good answer for this, and I am a massive fail at delineating hours. I'm not a morning person, but I have this awful habit of sometimes staying up till 3, 4 a.m. And sadly, even during lockdown, that habit has not gone away. I do try, and on a Saturday, Sunday, to switch off. I feel like my fiance may have a different perspective on whether I achieve that or not, but it's definitely the intention. My team is all remote anyway. We work across 3 different continents. And so, not a lot for us has changed in that respect. We still have our weekly meetings. We still do everything digitally. So for us, the transition has been okay. I guess it's just that general anxiety that I think everyone is experiencing right now.
We'll go into how the pandemic has affected your business, but could you first tell us a little bit about Pep Talk Her?
Yeah, so Pep Talk is a free app. You can download it. It's on Apple, it's on Android. And basically we think of it as like a Fitbit for your career. So what it does is it prompts you every week to reflect on the successes that you've had. So you could upload an email from your boss, for example, saying, hey, great job. You could put in the fact that maybe you did a $5,000 sale at your business this week. If you're a teacher, maybe you got, little Simone to read better this week. So maybe you could upload that. You could take a photo of an event that you've organized, albeit probably virtually now, and you could upload that to the app as well. So the idea is that when you go into your pay raise conversation or when you walk into a negotiation, you have data to back up I guess, your case as to exactly why you're awesome. And you have those data points to put forward to your boss. So that's on the consumer side. It's free. We wanted to have the biggest impact possible. We were stoked that Apple featured us globally, actually after the Vogue Codes event. They kind of to us and did a big feature, which was awesome. So that was really exciting. And, we monetize through our corporate work. So we work in-house with Fortune 500 companies right around the world. Our biggest market is the United States. Our second biggest is Australia, and our third biggest is Europe. So that's how we manage to keep the app free for everyone.
And have you still been able to provide services to your corporate clients in the last few months, and how has that worked?
Yeah, Julia, it's so crazy. Like, we've had, as I said at the start, we've been growing, which I feel a bit awkward even saying that, because I know that so many companies are struggling. And I think the reason is because we are virtual, right? And so we're able to do all of our trainings via Zoom. Some companies use WebEx and different products. But yeah, so we do everything virtually. And I guess previously we'd spend a lot of our time on a plane traveling to clients, whereas now we can just deliver it all virtually. Their clients and their staff from all around the country can dial in, rather than just the teams in Chicago or Sydney or San Francisco. So in some ways, it's allowed us to actually make the programming more accessible to more people. So, some sort of a silver lining.
And for you, what are the pros and cons of this virtual way of working?
So I guess, I think the pros are that, anyone can do delivering services online. So I guess that's a real pro. I guess the con is, and certainly at the Pep Talker side of things, something that I've had to work a little harder at is culture building. So I've engaged coaches for my staff so that they get a bit of extra support. I think that's a challenge, is how do companies build culture, and that's a big part of why the Salesforces of the world, the Microsofts of the world work with us, because we help them build that culture within their company. So it's kind of interesting now. We've had to really make sure that we apply that to our own team as well. But I think having clear boundaries, and it's something that I need to work better on, Julia, of like, I knock off work at this time, because you could just sit on your laptop in front of Netflix all night. And I don't think that that's healthy. And I think in the long term, that's going to lead to burnout. So I guess that's something that everyone on the session today needs to be conscious of, for sure.
You mentioned that Pep Talk Her is about tracking achievements.
Right.
Is that still important in these crazy times?
Yeah, because I think, a journalist asked me this the other day, and I think, some people are still getting raises right now, right? Like, a lot of people are losing their jobs, and it's very, very sad. And then there's a lot of companies that are absolutely killing it, right? That are doing super, super well. And so the people working at those companies are still well within their rights to ask their boss if they've achieved a lot, for a raise. And I think when we go through a situation of flux like this, if we are laid off, if we are asked to take a pay cut, if things are more stressful at work because maybe we're doing two people's jobs now, I think it's very easy, to start to blame yourself when maybe you don't hit that 10 out of 10 level that you expect of yourself. If you feel like your performance is maybe not as good as it was last year or not as good as you'd love it to be, first of all, I would say that that's very normal, because right now is not a normal time. So I think don't be too hard on yourself. And the second thing is that I think more than ever now, you do have to track those wins, right? Like, maybe you were able to make your boss laugh on a phone call and they haven't laughed for weeks because they've been so stressed. So like, all those little things actually are you contributing to the value of the business. Maybe you managed to make a sale even during these really challenging times. Keeping a record of that, because whilst you may not find it's appropriate to ask for a raise tomorrow, in 3 months, in 6 months, when things are better, you want to make sure that you still have a record of all of those wonderful things that you did, because we get so caught up in our own head, and it's easy to forget all the great stuff that we're doing. So listen, I'm biased, but I think you should absolutely be keeping track of all of the wonderful things that you're doing. Also, just because we know the way our brains work is that our brains are like a muscle. So if I wanted to get massive biceps, I'd hit the gym every day and work it, every single day, and that muscle would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's the same thing with our mindset. So if we want to have a really positive mindset, if we want to feel very confident and very in control of our career and our success, that's a muscle that you need to exercise every single day, right? And so a great way to do that is to track your achievements. Another great thing that everyone on the call today can do is get out your phone and text a mate, like text someone who loves you, or text a mentor from work, or text your best friend from work, and just say to them, hey, I'm on this random Vogue Codes webinar, and this random lady, Maggie Palmer from Pep Talk Her, has told me that I should text you and say, what do you think is my best quality? Because sometimes when we get down in the dumps and we kind of are hating on ourselves a little bit, which, happens from time to time, it's really wonderful to have that positive reinforcement from outside your own brain to remind you of just how awesome you are, and I would love for anyone on the call who does that to sort of message me afterwards on Instagram or LinkedIn. Let me know what people said, because sometimes we do this in sessions at corporates. Sometimes people cry because people say such lovely things. Sometimes people will be like a joke, especially if you text your brother. I've done that before, and they'll text you through some random thing as a joke. But it's a really great exercise. It's free. It's easy to do. I really recommend you do that for sure.
We've had a question from the audience, and this person has asked, how can I stand out in a crowded market of job seekers with lots of people having lost jobs recently?
I think that's a really great question. And a lot of people have lost jobs, but on the same side of that, a lot of companies are hiring. And we've seen massive tech companies like Shopify, like Twitter, like Atlassian come out publicly and say that going forward, all of their jobs will be remote first. So even in 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, when we have a vaccine and when things are back to normal, even then, their workforce will be remote first. So actually, there's a lot of opportunities that are opening up, right, for everyone. And we know that the pandemic, and especially in terms of employment, is impacting women to a higher extent than it is men. And that really, really sucks. But on the other side, one of the positives that I think is coming from this situation is that the job market is opening up. So people living in Wagga Wagga who are on the call, people living on the Gold Coast, people living in Perth, previously who didn't want to uproot and move to SF or wherever, or even to Sydney for that matter, they couldn't apply for those jobs. Now, those are all possibilities. So I think it's actually a really exciting time to be looking for a job. And if you think about wanting to stand out, I think personality is really important. You don't want to just be a resume, like put in something that makes you different, that no one else can compete with in the job market. So I live in New York City. So something that's different about me is that I am Australian, right? Like there's not too many Australians running companies in my space over here. So I lean into that because no one else can compete with that, right? So what is it about you and your skill set that no one else can compete with? Like whether it's you speak 3 languages, whether you increase sales at your previous company by 50%, whatever it is, make sure that that's front and center of your cover letter so that you can really speak to that. And then just also having data points, having those case studies, the statistics to put forward as to why you're the best teacher for the job, why you're the best marketing associate for the job, being really specific and also backing yourself. If you don't think you're the best person for that job, why would they hire you? You really have to walk into that situation knowing that they would be lucky to have you and projecting confidence and the skills that they need for that role.
We have another question from the audience. Maggie, what tips do you have to stand out to a prospective employer via a video screen?
Okay, I love this because all of the interviews, especially for everyone in Melbourne, again, we are thinking of you, Melbourne, is going to be most likely virtual, right? For safety first. So that's a great thing. So this is what I always do. Even before I did this webinar, Julia, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I had a little bit of Taylor Swift playing on my Spotify while I was like trying to hide my grey hairs, ladies. There's a lot of them. While I was doing that, I had some really upbeat music going so that I could kind of get high energy so that when I come onto this call, I'm going to be putting my best foot forward. So music really helps me because it helps your whole physical energy. The other thing that I always do is a power pose. So I'm not going to do it because I don't want to go out of frame, but basically you stand like this with your hands on your hips or your hands in the air. So you make yourself really big and physically powerful. And what that does is it actually increases the level of testosterone in your body. So we know that if you go into a job interview and you're sitting like this and you're hunched over and you're on your cell phone on Instagram beforehand, the level of testosterone is lower than if you make yourself big and powerful beforehand. So what I typically do before a big presentation is I go into the restrooms, I put my hands on my hips or in the air, and I hold that pose for 2 to 3 minutes because I know that my body during that stage is becoming bigger and I will be perceived as more confident. So that's really important when you're on a video call because, they can't see your whole body. They can't see the effort you've put into your outfit. They can't, get a sense of eye contact with your handshake. You lose all of that, right? And so it's really important that you be as confident as possible on the call. The other thing is you want to have a great background. You want to make sure that you've got no distractions. Like you don't want to kind of have your laptop half like this. Like you want to take it seriously, right? Like it's still a job interview.
And if you are in your job and you are trying to negotiate for a pay rise or a promotion, firstly, do you think that that is realistic at the moment to ask of your employer? And if not, what other kind of benefits could one be thinking about?
So what I always like to say is when you're going in to ask for a raise, context is everything. So if your boss has laid off 200 people yesterday, do I think you should walk in tomorrow and ask for an extra $10,000? No, I don't. I think that that is inappropriate, and that's not taking into account the entire situation. So you need to do your preparation. You need to understand, how is the company going? What is the context here? Have people been laid off? If you've been asked to do 4 people's jobs, maybe it's appropriate, but you need to just have that contextual understanding before you go into that conversation. The other thing you need to do is prepare. So you need to have a very clear understanding of your market value and also of how the company's going. So we work with an insurance company here in the United States, and they're actually doing better than they were before the pandemic. And they put that down to the fact that they've got no travel costs and that people are actually, getting through their paperwork and getting those insurance policies they've meant to do for ages. So in that context, there may be an argument that it is completely appropriate to ask for a raise, because really for them it's situation normal. But I think you've just got to have those understandings before you go in. And the other thing, when you think about what is the number that you want to ask for, I always like to think of it as 3 different things. I call it the 3 W's. So you want to have an understanding of what is your wish figure, what is your want figure, and what is your walk figure. So we think of about wish, want, walk. So you need to do all of that mental gymnastics beforehand to say, okay, what is the most outrageous figure I could ask for without laughing? What is that figure? That's your wish figure. Your want figure is, what is the rate that I think is appropriate and fair and will really encourage me to work really hard given the experience that I have? And what is the walk figure? Because if you keep asking and you never get a raise or a promotion, and they can't meet that walk figure, then, at that point, you need to make a decision. Do I want to stay at this company regardless? Or do I feel like I'm not actually valued at the level of my experience? And it's actually time for me to look elsewhere, right? And you might not quit tomorrow, but maybe you start applying for jobs. Maybe you start getting a resume ready, because, you may decide that is, you're just being undervalued and you can't work hard for that company. So I think doing the preparation beforehand will really help you feel more confident walking into those negotiations, for sure.
Let's rewind a bit. You started your career as a journalist. Mm-hmm. What prompted you to change direction and move to New York?
Yeah, so I loved being a journalist. It was awesome. I started up in little old Cairns, so big hello to every Queenslander on the call. I'm a Queenslander myself, from a farm west of the Goldie. So I started up there at Channel 7 when I was at uni, and then, worked all along the eastern seaboard at Parliament House in Canberra for Channel 10. Worked in London for the BBC World, which was super fun, came back and had an amazing time at SBS, at Dateline, which I just adored. So I loved it. I absolutely loved my job. But, there was a point along my journey where I had an experience myself of pay inequality. And it was kind of for me, the blinkers were taken off. I was like, what? Does this even happen? I was kind of raised to think that, girls can do anything and the world's a lovely utopian place. And then when that happened, I was like, what? And I was frankly really, really pissed off. I was really, really annoyed. And so I couldn't stop thinking about it for years and years and years. And people would come to me and ask me for advice. And I realized that it's a real problem. And I know that there are hundreds of women on this call today who have found out that they're being paid less than their male counterparts, who came back to work after maternity leave and weren't treated fairly, or who have been at the same job for 7 or 8 years and have never had a promotion, right? And so I started to hear all these stories and I became really interested, how could we help these people in a way that was scalable? I can coach them one-on-one, that's fine, but how do we scalably help make a difference? And so that's why I wanted to build an app so that we could kind of have that impact on a much larger level.
And how did you know when it was time to take the leap and quit your job? Was that decision made over time, or was there a specific moment?
So I reckon, Julia, I reckon that took literally years, because so what I did was I had a side hustle to start with. So I started a media training company. It was something that I knew because I'd been a journalist. I worked out how to do that, realized I could make money. And I think when you make your first dollar outside of your full-time job, it's like, it's kind of like a drug. You get addicted to it and you're like, oh my gosh, I have skills that other people will pay me for. This is amazing. So I built that business up. And then from there, I used that money to be able to fund Pep Talker. So it honestly took years. And then even when I moved to New York, you know, I was still consulting in New York for a couple of years on the side and doing Pep Talker on the side. And I've only been full-time on the business for a little under 18 months, like full-time. And I only started taking a salary not long ago. So it took ages. And I think, you know, doing it as a side hustle, any business, if you want to start an Etsy business, a tech business, a services company, doing it on the side where your contract allows you to is a great way. You know, nights, weekends, just kind of test the water, because you never know if people will actually pay you for it until you try. So it's kind of a big call to leave a great job and leave all that security and that wage and all the benefits that come with that without having the proof of traction first. So I always encourage people to start it as on the side if you can, and just like baby steps build from there.
And can you talk a little bit more about what you've learned about confidence and women, particularly from the data that you've gathered since starting Pep Talker?
Yeah, so something that was really interesting that you know is a big part of what we do is this concept of imposter syndrome. And so I'm going to guess that there might be others on the call who, like me, have at some point in their career had this experience of feeling like they weren't enough, or feeling like they're a fraud, or feeling like at some point the job police are going to knock on the door and kind of drag you out of the office because you don't belong, right? So sometimes we struggle to internalize our own success and our achievements. And that's, I think, been the biggest thing. And that is, you know, the key thing to being more confident and having more success in your career is being confident and having that innate sense that you are valuable, you are contributing, and that, you know, you are an awesome team member. And because if you know that you're awesome, it just radiates, right? And you know yourself, Julia, from people you know who are confident and who believe in themselves. I'm not talking about being a massive wanker. I'm just talking about like being confident and just being clear that, like, yeah, I have a lot to bring to the table. And that is it sounds easy and it sounds like you just flip a switch, but it's not, you know, like that's a muscle too. And it's something that, you know, I still have to work at this every day. And so I do think of it as a muscle, and I think of it as a daily practice of like remembering the value that you bring and surrounding yourself with people. I couldn't be where I am today without the support of my fiance and my family, in particular, a group of women entrepreneurs who are there when I have to have a cry, when I've made a mistake, or who are there to pop a bottle of champagne virtually with me when we sign a big client. You know, surrounding yourself with like-minded people, it just makes the journey so much easier and frankly more fun.
A lot of people in the audience are asking one question in particular, which is, I have put forward a case for a pay rise multiple times, but my manager keeps saying it's out of their hands. How can I keep pushing the issue?
Great question. So the first thing is that I believe you should ask for a raise at least once a year. So every year when you have your performance review or your pay raise conversation, you should be asking for more. Right? And you're not going to get more every year necessarily, but you should ask the question, because if you ask, it's very hard to say no. So that's the first thing, as long as you're achieving and doing great work, of course. So you want to be asking every year. The second thing is you want to come to your manager with solutions. So there's no point asking for a raise, not getting it, and then bitching and moaning about it. Like that's not really going to achieve anything, right? So I think it is incumbent on everyone on this call to do the work for your boss, right? So if your boss says no, you could say, okay, I'd really love to understand what do I need to do so that in 3 months we can revisit this conversation. So you want to ask for feedback and then start to iterate on that feedback in your job. And the second thing is you can always think about non-monetary benefits. So salary and pay is super important. I'm here for it. I love it. But you can also think about a full compensation package. So can you get some budget to do an online course through UNSW or Harvard or a membership to an organization? Could you ask for a free parking spot at work? Can you negotiate to permanently work Fridays from home even after COVID is over? You know, would your boss, and I've done this in the past, I've actually negotiated extra annual leave. So they couldn't give me the salary that I wanted. And so I think I got an extra 2 weeks annual leave. So they were like, yeah, that's fine. We'll do it off the books. So that, for me, that was really valuable because I love vacation. I love visiting my cute nephews. So that was really important to me. And that was the equivalent of money for me. So thinking outside of the square, you know, I have a friend who's also a member of the Pep Talk community. She wrote to us recently to say that she was offered a job, but the salary wasn't okay, but she negotiated it down to a full-time 4-day-a-week role. So thinking about solutions, in San Francisco, sometimes they'll pay for your pet insurance. Health insurance is a big deal for any of our US viewers today. So just thinking outside the square is super, super important.
Do you think that companies should publish the pay range for each role or level to their employees? And also, how can you do the appropriate research to understand what the market salary is for your kind of role?
Great question. So the first question is about, do I think that companies should have pay bands? In an ideal world, yes, I do. And what we're seeing is that a lot of companies who are very progressive and are very thoughtful about being really conscious about wanting to close that gender pay gap, they are open advocates for transparent pay bands. Some companies have this very transparent externally. There's a company called Buffer, and you can look up the salary of anyone in their company. Other companies, like there's a company called Tailwind that does Pinterest scheduling, they are transparent within the company. So internally, you can see what anyone else earns. The reason that is important and the reason that helps fight against the gender pay gap is because everyone's on the same page, right? You don't have to worry, oh, what's Julia earning? Whatever. What's Adam earning? It's all there, right? And if you don't like it, you can ask the question, but it's all very transparent. Salesforce, a big tech company, they actually do an annual benchmarking where they look at the data every year and adjust accordingly. So if you've been underpaid inadvertently, you'll actually get a check in the mail so that you are leveled up to where you should have been. So I personally think it's a really great thing. I know there's a lot of companies, in particular financial institutions, who actually have a clause in their contract that says that you're not allowed to talk to your colleagues about your salary. That is very problematic and it perpetuates the pay gap, right? Because secrecy just perpetuates this problem. So what I would say to people, if you want to get a sense of where you should sit in the market, you can look at the Glassdoors, you can look at the salary.coms, you can check on LinkedIn for comparable positions, and some of them will list a title. You can also Google your job title and PDF and Google it, and sometimes you'll see PDFs of previous job roles. That's a good little hack. But the best thing that you can do, honestly, is get comfortable with talking to other people about their salaries. So I'm not saying you should walk up to someone in the office and say, hey, what's the exact figure on your, pay slip? Like, I'm not saying that, but you could go up to them and say, hey, John, I'm going for this new role. I was thinking that I should be paid somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000. Does that feel about right for you, given my experience and my tenure at the company? So you can ask people to speak to you in ranges. Trusted people at work, mentors, advisors, and also your friends. And in particular, male friends, get really comfortable with asking them what they're paid and what they think you should be paid, because we know that there is a gap in Australia, in the United States. There's no country in the world that has completely gotten rid of the gender pay gap. So asking those questions is really, really helpful, and just keeping that in the back of your mind so that when you go for different roles, you kind of have an understanding of where you should sit in market.
We're also hearing a lot about pandemic pivots as people reassess what they want from their work and decide to change their careers during this time. What do you think is the best way for people to approach these kinds of decisions?
Look, you're quite right. And we're seeing people start small businesses and online businesses at unprecedented levels, right? Which is so exciting because, that gives you control and financial freedom ultimately, which I think is wonderful. And I'd love to see more women doing that. And by all means, if I can help, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Pep Talk Her. Happy to help in the DMs. But yeah, look, what I would say is, again, if you're lucky enough to have a stable job and if you feel comfortable staying there while you start a side hustle, I personally think that's a really great place to start. Not everyone has the cushion to be able to leap out of full-time work and into a full-time, new business. If you're lucky enough to do that, that's great. I didn't do it that way. I've bootstrapped my company, so I've actually never taken venture funding either. And we know that women get less venture money. It's actually disgusting, the low levels of venture capital money that gets into the hands of women globally. And it's even worse for women of colour. So I just want to acknowledge that, whilst there is a challenge with the gender pay gap, for people like me who identify as white, for people of colour, it's even worse. So really conscious of making sure that we include that in the debate and the conversation going forward as well. But in terms of the pivot, I think if you're in a great company, if there's the capacity to move internally, if there has been some shuffling of roles, if there has been some openings, put it forward to your boss. And I think it's really important to speak things out loud. So if you're in accounting and you would love to work in HR one day, your boss is not a mind reader. and neither is the head of the HR department, right? So you need to start to have those conversations and start to verbalize that. Maybe take someone from the HR team for coffee and say, hey, listen, I'd be interested in pivoting. How would you suggest I could get some experience? Will your boss in accounting let you do 1 day a week shadowing once a month? I don't know. Like, can you go to some meetings to get an understanding of how it works? So starting to take those baby steps when you're in a safe space can be a really great way. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting time for everyone who is thinking about pivoting. Absolutely.
And what's next for Pep Talk Her, and what is your ultimate goal for the business?
Yeah, look, we would love to help 1 million women negotiate a pay raise by 2023. So we've got a couple of years to hit that goal, but that's where we are heading. We just want to have an impact. Our core value is about creating a positive impact in the world. And so that's why it was really important for us that the app was free so that we could create that scalable change. We love the services side of our business. We love the clients that we have the privilege of working with, we've worked with Salesforce for years and they're just such a fabulous partner with us. We're having some great conversations about some Ivy League universities at the moment, about some exciting partnerships there. So we're just excited to keep growing the business. We're on track to be a 7-figure business this year, which we're really proud about. And we just want to keep growing, because as we grow, we'll be able to hire great people and grow our amazing team and keep paying it forward and doing great work. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to see the gender pay gap closed. They're saying it's going to take a couple of 100 years. I'm hoping that I can do myself out of a job before then, Julia, but let's watch the space.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your contribution today. And thank you to everyone who joined us and sent in questions. We're sorry we couldn't get to all of them. Please do look out for our future webinars and our events program. You can visit vogue.com.au/codes for the details. You can also subscribe to the Vogue Codes podcast for conversations with more inspiring women in tech. We look forward to seeing you next month.